dear ACT-SAF partners. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to this 6th session of the ICAO ACT-SAF series. And this one is on SAF accounting and book and claim systems. Once again, I'm very pleased to see so many of you here. Now, my name is Neil Dixon. I'm Chief Environmental Standards at ICAO, and I'm here with ICAO officers working on fuels and ACT-SAF, and with the focal points on environment from the ICAO regional offices. Now, presumably many of you are now familiar with the ACT-SAF series, as this is the 6th one. On a monthly basis, ICAO coordinates trainings on a key technical aspect of sustainable aviation fuels, and this is done under the auspices of the ICAO ACT-SAF program. Now, these trainings are developed and coordinated by ICAO thanks to the strong engagement and commitment of states and our ACT-SAF partners from the aviation and sustainable aviation fuel sectors. Now, today's training follows 5 previous ACT-SAF trainings, and those have been an introduction to SAF, SAF sustainability and reporting under CORSIA, SAF production technology and certification, SAF policies and SAF conversion processes. And for those of you who have missed these previous trainings, and as the constituents of ACT-SAF has grown, there will be a few of you, no doubt, you're most welcome to consult ICAO's ACT-SAF webpage. This public webpage allows you to access all the training videos and presentation material. Now, the objective of today's session, well, it's to provide participants with the knowledge on SAF accounting and an overview of ICAO work and ongoing industry initiatives on book and claim systems. Now, a robust accounting system is a key pillar for a well-functioning SAF market, and ICAO and its member states, along with aviation stakeholders, have worked hard to develop a reliable and effective system under CORSIA. This is to make sure the use of SAF and LCAF can be adequately monitored, reported, and verified. Now, over recent years, there has been an increasing interest in the aviation and fuel sectors for book and claim systems, which are a chain of custody method for SAF and LCAF, whereby physical fuels and their physical attributes can be decoupled. Such systems are currently being developed by stakeholders, several of whom will introduce their work in a few moments. Now, ICAO is following closely development of book and claim initiatives, especially as the topic of book and claim is present in the context of ICAO discussions on SAF, LCAF, and cleaner energies on the definition of a global framework at the 3rd Conference on Aviation Alternative Fuels, or CAF3. And CAF3 is due to take place towards the end of November this year in Dubai, in the UAE. The objective of today's session is to provide all participants with factual information on the concept of book and claim and on the state of play of the stakeholders' work on such systems. Now, to deliver this training we have for you today, we're very honoured and grateful to count on the technical expertise of 6 key players in the aviation and SAF sectors, as well as a member of ICAO CAPE's Fuels Task Group, FTG. They've all very kindly accepted to share their knowledge and technical know-how to present the ongoing work on SAF accounting and emerging book and claim systems. So with us today, we have Michael Walcott, the Regents Professor and Director at Ascent and expert in ICAO CAPE's Fuels Task Group. We have Azim bin Noizimi, Manager Climate Policy, as well as Michael Schneider, Assistant Director, Environmental Programs, both at IATA. We have Captain Claude Hurley, Director, Environment and Flight Operations at the International Business Aviation Council, IBAC. We have Madison Carroll, Executive Director at KSAFA. Laura Hutchinson, Manager, Climate Aligned Industries Aviation at SABA, the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance. We have Max Eckelbaum, Digital Solutions Manager, RSB, this is the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials. And last but not least, Thomas Bock, System Manager and Lead Aviation and Maritime at the ISCC, that's the International Sustainability and Carbon Certification. So a really big thank you to you all for being with us today. We're very excited to see your presentations. Now we'll just move on to the agenda for this training before I'll stop speaking and I'll leave the floor to Dr. Bruno Silva. And he will give you an update on ICAO-SAF activities and provide some insights on the path of CAF3. Then we'll move to the 6 presentations, and they'll all be given in sequence. After the final presentation, we will hopefully have some time at the end, hopefully around 20 minutes for a session of question and answers, and this will be moderated by Bruno. Now, as always, a little bit of housekeeping. I hope you make full use of the session to ask questions. And if you want to ask questions, please keep them to the end, but please raise your hand or post your questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to address it during the Q&A. The questions may also be targeted directly to our speakers today, and we encourage every participant to make today's training as interactive and collaborative as possible. Now, without further ado, let me pass the floor to Bruno Silva for a short update on the ACT-SAF program and the road to CAF3. I wish you all a very pleasant ACT-SAF training. Thank you very much.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So thank you very much, Neil. And so I'll provide this quick update on the ACT-SAF program. So if you can go to the next slide. So as a reminder, like we have all the most updated information is on the ACT-SAF platform. So the list of partners is constantly updated. So we recently had important partners joining the program, like Boeing, and also new states, like I think the last one was Suriname. So our list of partners and states are increasing constantly. So, and we invite you to keep track of that, like on our website. And if we go to the next slide, as a reminder, again, like, so the key request we're receiving from our partners is on conceptual training on SAF. And of course, like many questions are arising on book and claim systems and SAF accounting. So as we said in previous sessions, like we are happy to receive feedback on the list of trainings. So this is why we included these training on SAF accounting and book and claim systems now. And we hope it will be useful to address many of the questions that are arising on this topic. And again, like we are welcome to receive any feedback on the next sessions. Please contact us if you have any suggestions or questions that should be addressed in the next events. And if we go to the next slide, we have some short updates on the program itself. So many feasibility studies will be developed under ACT-SAF. So we have 3 new feasibility studies that are being developed under the existing ICAO project, and we are getting close to their conclusion. So we'll have news on that very soon on these feasibility studies for Zimbabwe, Cote d'Ivoire, and Rwanda. Yeah, there's a typo here. It's not Cabo Verde, it's Rwanda, but this will be published very soon. So, and then we'll have financial resources that were provided by ACT-SAF partners, and we'll be developing many additional feasibility studies with that. So we're working with the European Union on to initiate feasibility studies in 10 partner states. Very recently, we also received like the support announcement by the United Kingdom to the ACT-SAF projects. They made this announcement during the pre-CAF3 consultation event a couple of weeks ago. And finally, like there are studies and initiatives being pursued by ACT-SAF partners as well. So we know like the World Bank is doing a lot of projects, the United States and many other ACT-SAF partners. And these are all recognized in our ACT-SAF tracker of initiatives. So here's a snapshot of the tracker, like, and all the details. If the studies are already published, you can download the results there on this tracker. Invite you all to keep track of that as well. So if we move to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about CAF3. So we have been showing this slide in all our events. So this is our main timeline for CAF3, and we're getting closer to our finish line. And CAF3 will be held next month in Dubai. And a couple of weeks ago, we held this pre-CAF3 outcomes consultation, which was a very successful event where our member states could share initial discussions on what will be the outcomes from CAF3, and more details on that in the next slide. So so if we can move to the next slide. So we have here we have the link to this pre-CAF3 outcomes consultation, and this event discussed possible CAF3 outcomes, including a draft ICAO global framework for aviation cleaner energy. So all this information is available on the website, including the videos of the proceedings. And finally, we're getting close to CAF3. And now, as an update, we have all the Secretariat working papers are now available at the conference website. There are 9 working papers that will support the meeting, the conference discussions. And now we're expecting like the documents, the working papers from members, from ICAO member states and observer organizations to be submitted. Here are the deadlines, so they're coming soon. So many more working papers will be published on our website very soon. And for more information, please refer to the CAF3 website. And with that, I would like to hand it over like to our first speaker. So we have Mike Wolcott here that will talk about ICAO work on SAF accounting and reporting, which is related like to the definition of basic concepts related to SAF accounting and reporting. So Mike, thank you very much for being with us here today. So over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Bruno. Greetings, everyone. So the briefing now I'm going to be giving here was developed through the ICAO Fuels Task Group. It was led by myself and my colleague, Lena Martinez. And we put this together in conjunction with Bruno from ICAO and a host input from a host of different experts around the country from different organizations, including many of those that are here today. So next slide, please. So what I'd like to, this is just a basic outline of what we'll be covering in this briefing. Introductory concepts in terms of making sure that we're all on the same page with various terms and concepts. Moving into chain of custody methodologies, which are essential to book and claim or accounting and reporting methods. We'll look at CORSIA's accounting and reporting methods specifically within there, and emerging SAF book and claim initiatives, which are occurring worldwide. And finally, then we'll wrap up with the relationship between CORSIA activities and these book and claim initiatives. Next slide, please. So to start with, we want to make sure we all understand sort of the various scopes of emissions that are set forth by the greenhouse gas protocols. Scope 1 emissions are combustion emissions that are directly produced from an asset that's owned and controlled by the reporting company. So for our case in aviation, an airline burns a fuel, it produces a combustion emission, and that's a Scope 1 emission for that airline. In the case of Scope 2 and 3, these are both indirect emissions that are incurred from the corporate relationships on this. So a Scope 2 emission is one that is produced from the use and distribution of electricity, heat, or purchase or steam, which is purchased by the reporting company. So if an airport purchases electricity, has a carbon intensity to that, that's a Scope 2 emission for that airport. In the case of a Scope 3 emission, it's an indirect emission that's not covered under Scope 2s, and then but has a consequence of the reporting company's activities that are not from a source that they're owned and operated. So in this sort of case, if you're a major corporation and you use aviation to travel as part of your business, then that use is a Scope 3 emission for that company. So one thing that's important to recall in these aspects and understand is that Scope 2 and 3 emissions are indirect emissions that are a result of somebody else's Scope 1 emission from there. Next on this is the chain of custody. And so chain of custody is simply a process that provides sort of inputs and outputs and tracks these from information as well as physical products as it moves through a supply chain for those. We're going to talk about two that are particularly relevant to aviation in this sector, but there are multiple forms of chain of custodies. And then lastly, double counting is defined by the greenhouse gas protocol to occur when a single transferable emission unit is counted by multiple entities against the same goals. And so this double counting is meant to be avoided in the cases so that you don't, say, have two airlines accounting for the same emission credit or two corporations, the same Scope 3 emission credit along the line for that. So these are just terms we're going to be using and concepts as we move through this briefing. Next slide. So let's start off with chain of custody methodologies. The first one we're going to talk about are mass balance methods. And what's really important as we look at this is to start with a CORSIA eligible fuel producer produces not only a physical fuel, but has a number of sustainability attributes to those, including greenhouse gas emission reductions. And so those are then certified in a sustainability certificate. And those two products are important as we move forward in this. So both the physical fuel and the sustainability certificate from those. So in a mass balance scenario, what we have is that these sustainable aviation fuels move through the supply chain where the sustainability certificate and the physical fuel move together. They're put into a blending facility where they're blended with conventional jet fuel as per ASTM standards on these. And so then those are distributed to different operators. And in the case of this, because you may have, say, a common fuel tank system, those operators multiple operators may actually fly a molecule of the fuel, but the sustainability credits are traveling with those that purchase those sustainability credits. So what the important part is as those credits go forward, they have to be traveling together in the supply chain with this. Next slide, please. In the case of a book and claim chain of custody, what we have again is the two attributes of the fuel, both the physical fuel and a sustainability credit, but they can actually move through separate supply chains. What's key to this is that the sustainability certificate actually be entered into a secure registry, and that registry then tracks the movement of that component in one supply chain through, say, that while the fuel moves in a different supply chain. So this is different than a mass balance because they do not have to be occur at the same operators for that. They can actually occur in separate ones. So next slide, please. So characteristics of these book and claim concepts is that first, book and claim is a chain of custody methodology. That term is used across a number of different aspects and programs, but really what it is at its heart is a chain of custody methodology. It tracks the flow of the physical product and the environmental attributes through transactions across the supply chain. It can be used for tracking claims against Scope 1 and Scope 3 emissions for there. And what's important is book and claim is not inherently synonymous with schemes that bring value to environmental attributes. That's an important component. It's oftentimes been used synonymous to that, but it's really just a chain of custody methodology. The benefits of actually employing book and claim components is that operators that may or may not have access to actual SAF molecules because it may not be produced in their region, can be facilitated to have access to the environmental benefits of SAF by purchasing and claiming those environmental benefits. It expands the potential market for SAF producers to go outside of their physical region or geographic region, and it facilitates logistical efficiencies to reduce costs and emissions for there. But despite those benefits, there are some challenges that need to be addressed as we move forward. One is sort of the definition and widespread use of the protocol for emission reportings, the entity and location who hosts the registry, any potential conflicts that might occur between geographically dependent incentive or regulatory programs, say a mandate at an airport or a state-based incentive program like a low carbon fuel standard. And then lastly is sort of potential overlaps when complying with different schemes. Next slide, please. So let's look at accounting and reporting systems for fuels within CORSIA because they do already exist. And so CORSIA, to start with, CORSIA is designed to address Scope 1 emissions from international aviation operators. It's very important that this is the remit to CORSIA for there. And an airplane operator can reduce its CORSIA offsetting requirements through the use of CORSIA eligible fuels. And these fuels can be produced and uplifted anywhere in the world. That's explicitly called out within the Environmental Technical Manual. And for that, CORSIA has stood up a detailed monitoring, reporting, and verification, or MRV system, to be able to sort of track these CORSIA eligible fuel claims. And the MRV system within CORSIA has a sustainability certification, which is issued by CORSIA-approved sustainability certification schemes, and reporting of CEF-related information and verification of that information by an accredited third-party verifier. So these three components of the system are all in place. They're all laid out within CORSIA manuals, which are available through ICAO. Next slide, please. So one component to understand sort of the relationship between these chain of custody methodologies and the CORSIA MRV is that mass balance is the chain of custody methodology that is employed within the MRV up until the point of the the CORSIA eligible fuel blending. So what happens is, from the feedstock production through the conversion process and into the blending tanks, it employs a mass balance approach to this. However, once the fuel is blended, then book and claim elements are eligible and employed within CORSIA. Next slide, please. There are both state and SCS reporting requirements to ICAO for these, and these are explicitly put in place to avoid double counting of the CORSIA eligible fuel. So the SCS is required to report fuel usages and attributes to ICAO, which is then published on the ICAO website. And in addition to that, a reporting state reports their use of CORSIA eligible fuels to ICAO, which is also published on there. So again, this is put forth in these two methodologies to avoid double counting. Next slide, please. There's a number of emerging SAF book and claim initiatives which are occurring in this. We see these emerging there. It's a very rapidly changing and fluid field in this area. Largely, these are meant to address Scope 3 emissions from aviation end users, and those would be corporations, businesses, or individual travel for that. These different schemes in here are have different, they cover different elements of a book and claim initiative, and they're at different various levels of implementation. Some are conceptualized or under design. Those are in yellow here, while some have actually been published or implemented, and those are in green. Again, many of the colleagues that we have on this session today are a part of these programs. Next slide, please. So the common elements of all these programs is first off a methodology which outlines the principles, the rules, the protocols for issuing sustainability credits for those, a registry which then houses the transactional activities for the transfer of the molecules and the sustainability attributes, and then lastly a verification program to ensure compliance with the methodology that was laid out in the first part. A common attribute of the registry, which is really a critical component to all of this, are security of that registry, differentiation in users' capabilities, auditability, communication and comparisons across other registries for that, so we can avoid double counting. Next slide, please. So lastly, just to kind of review a few different basic concepts which are critical to the rest of the presentations. One is CORSIA is a regulatory scheme that's designed to address Scope 1 emissions for international flight only. It does not address emissions from domestic flights, and it does not address emissions claimed as voluntary schemes for Scope 3 emissions are not addressed also under CORSIA. So those two are different systems for that, and we're focused on international flight and Scope 1 emissions. Again, to reiterate, CORSIA uses a mass balance chain of custody up until the point of blending. And then after blending to form a conventional fuels, then CORSIA includes book and claim elements for that. And after the commingling in a tank, a farm, or this sort of thing, book and claim really is the default system within CORSIA. CORSIA is not related to bringing environmental benefits or value to environmental benefits through partnerships with Scope 3 emissions. That's for these other programs, which we're going to hear about. And therefore, greenhouse gas emission reductions claimed in CORSIA by using CEFs are not affected by other programs addressing Scope 3 emissions. So next slide. So we have a set of references here. So when the slides are posted, you can see where these informations were drawn from. And with that, Bruno, I'll hand you back the slides.
Thank you very much, Mike. Yeah, I guess that was a great start to the session, to lay out the basic concepts that we'll be talking about here with our industry partners. And and just a quick update, on the slide that you showed about the annual reports to SESs, we're happy to say that they are now published. The first annual reports from the ICAO approved SESs are now published on the ICAO website. So this process is starting now, right? It already started and it's moving. So you can already consult with all the fuels that were certified for CORSIA and the economic operators, like the feedstock producers, the fuel producing facilities that are already certified by CORSIA. So this is already published information since a couple of weeks ago. So this is all moving very fast now. So thank you very much for that. So, and with that, we'll move to our first speaker from the industry. So we'll start with IATA. So we'll have our colleagues like Azim bin Norazmi and Michael Schneider, who will talk about IATA's work on SAF accounting and reporting. So Azim, I guess you will be starting, right? So
yeah,
the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bruno. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to firstly say hi and to sort of quickly introduce myself. So I am the Climate Policy Manager in IATA. And when I first joined IATA about a year ago, I was given, I think, one of the utmost and challenging tasks, which is to harmonize the SAF accounting approach that we have in the industry. Of course, this is such a huge task for us to begin with, but actually it's not supposed to be that difficult, right? Because essentially under CORSIA, we already have a methodology to account for that emissions reductions from the use of CORSIA eligible fuels to begin with. But of course, together with me today, I will be joined by my colleague later, Michael Schneider, who would kind of also explain about the IATA accounting and reporting platform that we'll be working on in the next few months. And of course, we are certainly excited to share this solution to the rest of the industry and aviation stakeholders. So let's flip through my first slide, Bruno. I think most of you, if not all, might have seen this already. So this is taken from the IATA 2050 Net Zero Roadmaps that we had published just in June this year. So if you have not seen these roadmaps already, I would highly suggest that you click on that link over there and read through the different 4 roadmaps that we had published to basically put together what are the expected timeline in terms of us meeting that net zero target and what are the key enablers for us to be meeting that target. And I think what I just wanted to convey here that in terms of SAF, I think we all know that this is the most significant decarbonization lever for the aviation industry. And in terms of number, right, that basically means that in 2050, from the amount of about 0.24 of million tons of SAF that we have just last year in 2022, we basically need to scale up to 450 million tons of SAF. And that's of course depending to the amount to the types of SAF that we use in terms of the pathway and the feedstock, because then that will also contribute to the amount of the GHG emission reductions that we are obtaining from that SAF. If we flip through the next slide, Bruno. And of course, in achieving that, right, we basically need SAF production in every possible geographical location around the world. And of course, this is not the reality today, right? I just wanted to bring your attention to this map that you can see on the screen right now. So this is basically, it's just the projected renewable fuel projects that was already announced up to the year 2028. I wanted to kind of highlight that these are not just facilities that are dedicated to SAF, but these are renewable fuel projects that could have SAF as one of the output from the different facilities. And if you flip through the next slide, Bruno, then you can see that this is currently not the case. Today SAF is only available in some part of the world. And of course, in order to make this happen, I think we believe in IATA that one key element that would enable us to really scale up is the use of a global and robust SAF accounting framework, which you can see in the next slide. Next slide, yeah. So here, I just wanted to put again that, we believe that a global SAF accounting framework based on a robust chain of custody approaches is a must-have for SAF deployment and its commercial viability. If you just click on the first one, Bruno, we believe that a fit-to-purpose SAF accounting framework would really enable airlines to claim for the environmental benefits from SAF purchases, and this is truly important, because this is really the fundamental of why we need to produce SAF, which is to allow airlines to really claim for that emission reductions and to decarbonize and to meet that net zero target at the end of the day. And of course, they will be doing this in terms of meeting many of their regulatory and additional commitments that they have made as well. And in doing this, we basically need to ensure a few things. That we need to ensure that there will be immutable tracking, where the SAF transaction, once it is surrendered through a platform or a system, it can never be edited, or people can never try to make fraudulent activities through this transaction. We need to enable verification to ensure the credibility of the emission reduction claims. We need to provide full transparency of the claims made over any specific batch of SAF, again, with the objective of preventing double counting. And of course, from a cost point of view, we also need to allow stacking of incentive whenever this is possible, as long as no double counting is happening, to sort of maximize the opportunity to fund SAF. And we know that it is about 2 to 4 times more expensive than conventional fossil fuel. And if you can click the next one, we also believe that the utilization of such a flexible and trusted chain of custody mechanism will basically unlock additional benefits. I think a lot of this has been already mentioned by Mike in the earlier slide, so I would touch it on again. But what I wanted to also touch is in terms of the equal and healthy competition, because we basically need to provide an opportunity for all airlines in the world to get equal access to SAF and to have equal opportunity to decarbonize their emissions through the use of SAF. And before we move towards the IATA initiatives for SAF accounting, I wanted to move on to the next slide, which basically tells you some of the frequently asked questions. And we basically get this frequently asked question when we speak to the different stakeholders in the value chain. And the first one is really people are asking whether, when we say, for example, the word book and claim, are we really sort of like limiting ourselves to the book and claim as a chain of custody model? Are we not considering mass balance? Are we not considering physical segregation? What we wanted to say, I think we need to kind of recognize the fundamental principle of this SAF emissions reduction. It does not happen at the tailpipe of the engine, but rather it happens upstream when the SAF is being produced. So to us in the industry, it does not really matter what chain of custody that you employ in accounting for these emission reductions. But what's important is that this SAF accounting system must be able to accommodate any types of the chain of custody model or a mix of them whenever it is needed, depending to how the SAF is being supplied to the end users. And of course, we need to also acknowledge that SAF are being delivered in many different ways to the airlines. And then secondly, we also have heard a lot of this concern on the SAF accounting, especially from developing states, if actually such a global accounting system would favor any particular geographic location of SAF production. Well, the quick answer to this, no, this is not true, because a robust SAF accounting framework, as I mentioned earlier, would provide the airlines with equal access to SAF, and this is absolutely important and necessary when especially SAF is not yet available in every part of the world. But what's more important is that it could now provide the SAF producers with the access to a more global and bigger market, right? So rather than now they are restricted to the physical local market, and now they would be able to actually sell these SAF environmental attributes to airlines or to aircraft operators who even do not operate physically in a particular location. And also, so this becomes like a great proposition for any new SAF producers around the world to basically justify any local SAF production. And when I say local SAF production, it also basically could contribute to global feedstock diversity, because then of course you would then make use of the feedstock that is closest to your sort of production to optimize that GHG emissions reduction. If you go to the next one, then people could also ask, but we have seen a lot of these systems, or self-accounting or book and claim initiatives in the industry. What does this mean? So basically what we wanted to convey is that CORSIA firstly already provides a robust methodology for self-accounting. As mentioned by Mike, it's already stated that aircraft operators are eligible to claim for the emission reductions from purchasing and blending records. And further in the ETM in clause 3.3.5.5, it's stated that these CORSIA eligible fuels can be purchased and uplifted anywhere in the world. And we believe that for a successful scaling of SAF, we basically need a wider global recognition of SAF accounting system. And last but not least, the question is, how could then we ensure this accounting system could prevent double counting, which might again have gone through what is the concept of double counting in his slides. So we in IATA believe while there might not be just one single global registry for SAF or for CORSIA eligible fuel, we believe that interoperability between different SAF accounting system is such a key important enabler in preventing double counting, right? So once you transaction SAF in one particular platform, this is recognizable across all the other platforms, and that will basically prevent you from double counting or double using or double using, double claiming, and double counting of this emissions reduction. And in doing this, we wanted to kind of convey to all of you today that IATA, together with all the industry players, are already kind of like starting the discussion to see how this could be enabled in the market, which goes to my next slide. So when we first started this collaboration a few months ago, together with our counterpart in Airlines for America, IATA had called upon all of these active players in the field of decarbonizing aviation to kind of like to discuss about how can we collaborate and develop a single set of principles for credible, robust, and transparent accounting system for SAF, and most importantly, also a single set of guidance for GHG accounting and reporting for SAF applying to all actors in the value chain. So we have come up with a collaboration objective, and we are still currently discussing how this could be achieved. And I'll kind of explain the next step in my next slide. But for now, the other collaboration objective is really to support the economical scale of SAF, by identifying common principles across the different SAF accounting initiatives to enhance credibility, harmonizations, and transparency. And secondly, to provide clarity to different stakeholder groups. It's truly important. And third but not least is basically to maximize the ability to use SAF accounting system and registries to monitor, validate the emission reduction claims from the use of SAF. And in the next slide, I will kind of explain that. So you might ask us, who are these people that you are talking to? And this can be seen now in the slides, where this basically is a group of people that really represent every sort of like part of the aviation value chain, because we wanted to make sure that, the elements that we discuss are very practical, and it kind of like really addresses some of the challenges that we have with in SAF accounting. On the next slide. Under this collaboration also, we have created 4 different work streams. The first one is a work stream called Reporting and Target that discusses about the harmonization in the SAF accounting and reporting methodology and approach. And then the second group is a certification group that discusses how some of these certification issues can be addressed for SAF. And then the third group is the group that will basically look into the interoperability between different SAF accounting systems. And of course, most importantly, we also need 4 groups to kind of discuss about capacity building and communication to disseminate a lot of this information and awareness that we have discussed within this group. And I wanted to also convey that this discussion is not meant to be exclusive to just this group of people. So we normally do, for example, in this kind of presentation, to share the sort of progress of this discussion to all of the different stakeholders. Really, our intention is to be as inclusive as possible in our communication and our work in terms of this harmonization effort. Next. I would like now to really focus on the IATA's own SAF accounting and reporting initiative. The first one that we have actually developed is a principle and policy guidance on SAF accounting. So in the next slide, I will include a QR code where you will actually get a copy of these slides at the end of the day, and then you would be able to go to the IATA.org website and download some of these accounting and policy papers. And then the next one is that under the collaboration, we are trying to discuss in terms of a possibility of producing a joint guidance document on common principles on SAF accounting initiatives. So we feel that this is truly important. Our intention is not to make an additional set of guidance for book and claim or SAF accounting, but what we want to do is we want to complement whatever existing methodology and make reference to them that we have in the market today, and to have this to become a reference for any past, current, and future SAF accounting initiatives as well. And we hope that this could be solved really soon, and we hope that we could have this by the first quarter of next year. And the next part will be, so P2 is basically something that IATA will be developing together with the rest of the aviation stakeholders. P3 will be basically IATA's own documentation, or what we call as recommended practice for SAF accounting methodology. This will be coordinated by IATA, and will follow a robust governance process of our RP production, which we already normally have. And again, we plan to have this by the second quarter of 2024. The next one, Bruno. We also heard from our airline members as well. There are some issues in terms of self-sustainability certification, challenges that we need to address, and in terms of the uniformity of this proof of sustainability that our members are basically getting from the different fuel suppliers. So to address this, we are basically talking to ISCC and RSB, who's also part of this presentation today, to produce a joint guidance document that explains in the most practical way how does the sustainability certification process looks like, and what are the associated documentation that should accompany these claims of emissions reduction. And last but not least, of course, we are also planning to kind of have our own accounting and reporting platform, and this will be explained by my colleague Michael. Michael, the floor is yours. This is just the QR code where you can, and then you can certainly hear about our platform next.
Thank you, Azim. And yeah, Michael Schneider, good morning, good afternoon. And I'm mindful of the time that's left to cover this aspect. We'll do my best. So we heard about the ongoing efforts from our advocacy team. And I mean, we look really at a phased approach here with the implementation of a SAF accounting mechanism for our members. This vision is not really a new vision. If we go to the next slide, basically already more than 2 years ago, we had in mind, or we started to have that vision that there is a need for, if possible, a global SAF and book and claim mechanism that would be catering for the airlines and all other SAF stakeholders as well. But we also realized that at the time, there were still, I would say, some gaps, or maybe some of the key principles had to still be validated and agreed by the majority of stakeholders in any case. So we felt it was actually a bit premature to start developing something that could be called a SAF book and claim mechanism or registry. And you know, those things are used interchangeably, sort of in the context of SAF accounting. If we now fast forward, of course, a lot of progress has been made, and I think it's really encouraging. But admittedly, there's still some open questions. I think we would all agree this. But in any case, IATA has now moved forward with this.
Oops, I think we lost Mike.
Yep. While we lost him, I can certainly cover for him while he comes back. So this is just
if you can wrap up, Azim. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. This is just showing some of the features that we tend to include in our platform. And Michael, maybe you can wrap up as well now that you're back.
I hope you can hear me. Sorry for that. I don't know. I just went away. So yeah, basically, this is really one of the flagship projects. And of course, we have received this mandate from the airlines, a very clear mandate, actually, to develop a mechanism that's aviation late. And we heard the 450 million tons of fuel that airlines will be having to invest in. So clearly this is meant to be an open system, and we're not planning on reinventing the wheels. There's of course the key principles that we're trying to embed in the future platform that will cover basically all the different aspects and the different features that you see here. Of course, the tracking, recording, SAF inventory, because with larger volumes then coming through such a system, you need to very well understand what is the status of each batch fuel that has been invested in, transferring certificates, etc. I will maybe keep it shorter here now because of the time constraints that we have. I think the point that we would like to make here is that we are very keen actually to also develop a robust governance around this. And we would like to, of course, have these discussions with states to make them part of this journey, because we clearly want them to feel comfortable, but also understand their needs and what they're looking for. And of course, that applies to all of the other stakeholders as well. Interoperability is very, very important. And we are, of course, watching the space, what's happening around us. And there is clearly alignment needed so that we can reconcile any use or a claim that are being made in the SAF space. So you see it here conceptualized, but of course, this is something that we are now slowly but steadily and gradually going to be implementing and phasing out. I feel I had a lot more to say, but I guess the time is here really constraining me from doing this, but we're happy to, of course, answer any questions later on. Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you very much, Michael and Azim. And yes, like we'll be making available this presentation online, and also your contact information so that people can take a look in more detail at everything that is going on at IATA, like all very exciting work. And we look forward to seeing the development of all this work. So with that, like we'll jump to our next speakers. So where we'll hear from Captain Claude Hurley and Madison Carroll, from IBAC and KSAFA, and they will talk about also their work on book and claim. So I guess Claude will be starting, right? Claude, so the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Silva, and really thank you to all of you for being here. It's great to see so many people on the call today, and we're thrilled to be able to present some of our initiatives. I'm happy as well to give most of my time to Madison, who's a real expert as the executive director of KSAFA, in which we're a very strong partner with. But I wanted to take the time today to briefly give you an overview of IBAC's, International Business Aviation Council's, efforts on sustainable aviation fuels, and specifically on book and claim. So slide 43, if you please. And so the big challenge for us is that while we do present a very unique value proposition for our customers, we realize that we have to do our part in sustainability. As early as 2009, the business aviation community got together with the General Aviation Manufacturers Association and agreed to a business aviation commitment on climate change. That commitment was reiterated in 2021 with the inclusion as well to more specific language about net zero by 2050. And we're very thrilled that ICAO and the member states agreed to that collective effort to decarbonize our shared sky by 2050 at the last year's assembly. And as part of the business aviation commitment on climate change, our own analysis, which is supported by ICAO and others, is that SAF will play the greatest role in the short to medium term to get us to net zero by 2050. Part of the challenge that we face is that our aircraft and our customers want to and can land pretty much anywhere. And therefore, we have the extra challenge of having access to SAF in small to medium-sized airports that aren't regularly serviced by commercial airlines. And book and claim, therefore, becomes the key for us to be able to, as many other speakers have mentioned, to separate the environmental attributes and to do our part while uploading normal Jet A until such a time that SAF is more widely available. And so distribution is key, and we believe that in the long term, but we believe in the short term that book and claim allows us to access SAF where it's not physically available. Let's go to slide 44, if you please. And so as a large part of our effort, we realize a couple of things. One, business aviation is willing and able to pay for SAF and the premium that it entails, perhaps in a greater way than other parts of aviation at this time. And so due to corporate governance issues and environmental commitments made by our customers, and therefore our commitments can actually help sustain and propel the further development of SAF. But to be able to get there, book and claim is a key enabler. So SAF then becomes a key enabler. And I'll let you read a slide, of course, but the key part for us is that, as others have mentioned, governance is going to be key going forward. We've learned a lot of lessons over many years about how offsets were accepted or not by the wider public. And in terms of book and claim, a great effort needs to continue to be made to ensure that book and claim transactions are transparent, that the accountability can be verified, and that overall the trust in the system is protected. And in line with that, we have partnered up with, along with others, including IATA and others, to support KSAFA's effort. And it's my great pleasure to then pass the floor to Ms. Madison Carroll, who's Executive Director of KSAFA, who is a real expert in this field and can take the floor from here. So thanks everyone again for your interest in SAF and book and claim, and we'll look forward to working with all of you going forward. Thank you very much.
All right, can we go to the next slide? Okay, perfect. Thank you for that introduction, Claude. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I thank everybody for their time. So KSAFA is actually the Council on Sustainable Aviation Fuels Accountability. You can see our board here on the left, and we're developing a model that supports book and claim, but in truth supports all chain of custody models to include direct upload and mass balance. So with that quick introduction, we'll go to the next slide. And these are just kind of providing some foundation behind our thinking on the way we've developed this going forward. So when we look at SAF, and I think this is something that we all understand, but the emissions come from the production and feedstock of SAF. The fuel itself burns just like jet fuel. So when you look at what the two products are that we're actually looking at, we're looking at the fuel itself, and we're looking at the increased environmental attribute. And because SAF costs more, we need to derive value from that environmental attribute. And so we were really looking at diving into how do you derive and maximize the value of the SAF attribute. And that comes through producers' ability to use it, and incentives and mandates, operators using it in regulatory and voluntary compliance programs, and corporate ESG. So if we go to the next slide. I'm not going to go through book and claim. As was talked about earlier, the purpose of showing this is when, again, I said KSAFA methodology supports book and claim, but it also supports all chain of custody models, because what we're really looking at here is this orange box. How do you describe and transfer that environmental attribute that comes from that feedstock and production data and that fuel transaction information? So KSAFA's methodology focuses on this orange box and how it flows through the different chain of custody or the different stakeholders that touch that SAF. If we go to the next slide. So because SAF is different than traditional jet fuel, and we're looking at the value of a different product, we've kind of come up with these three baseline questions that we set out to tackle. And that's: how does a customer understand and verify what they're purchasing? How do they know the product hasn't been previously sold or claimed? This is the double counting that we're talking about. And then how can we ensure reasonable access to a product in short supply and high demand? And that's through the support of book and claim. So I'll go through how we kind of derived at these three questions and what is needed to answer these. Next slide, please. All right, so there's a lot of words here, and I'm not going to heavily hit on this, but I hope these slides are available afterwards so you can look at this. We mapped the needs of all the stakeholders and looked at the end state. What is the end state in a SAF transactions that each portion, the producers, the suppliers, the operators, scope 3 users, and ultimately compliance programs are trying to achieve? And when we look at that, producers are trying to increase supply, and to make revenue to increase supply. Suppliers are trying to meet the demands of their customers. operators trying to decarbonize and pass on or reallocate the scope 3 emissions. Scope 3 users are also trying to decarbonize their flights. And ultimately, compliance programs are trying to increase the use of SAF and encourage that use. So the second step of that is, well, what needs to be in place to achieve that end state? How do we support that? And ultimately, when you look at each of these groups of users, SAF markets are critical. Each of them needs to either operate on, buy, sell, or develop credible global SAF markets, and ultimately compliance programs have to have confidence in those markets. So if SAF markets are critical, what needs to be in place to support those markets? If you go to the next slide. And this is how this is what we see that needs to be done. Clarity, consistency, and comparability of the SAF attributes. These attributes and these transactions need to be recognized and accepted by regulatory agencies. And the interoperability that we've already talked about, there's going to be a host of registries. KSAFA is not developing a registry. We are developing the framework that supports registries and markets to operate. What is the common language that allows this interoperability? What is the common language and common set of guidelines that allows a customer to know, no matter what registry they're operating off of, it's playing by a common set of fair rules. So if we go to the next slide. Again, this is reiterating the same thing. We see those same 5 buckets of stakeholders on the left, and these generally accepted, commonly understood principles for SAF transaction should be publicly available, non-proprietary, designed and managed by the aviation industry and its stakeholders. Let's go to the next slide. So I think it's best to look at this through an example, and the most robust markets in the world, the financial markets, have something called the International Financial Reporting Standards. These are accounting rules for publicly traded companies that were developed by a nonprofit board of accountants, and they are required within 167 jurisdictions globally. So we see in global financial markets already something like this already in place. It provides transparent, consistently, easily understood financial statements for publicly traded companies that allow investors, auditors, governments, and regulators to understand and easily read and understand these transactions of these companies. So they provide that trust and credibility in the global financial markets already. Without this, I think there would be confusion and hesitancy within these markets to and really slow the economy. And so this has a direct correlation to SAF. We need the IFRS, but for SAF transactions. So a globally accepted principles developed by a nonprofit board and recognized by governments and regulator entities, providing the same confidence for SAF chain of custodies, auditors, governments, and regulators to enable and support the growth of SAF markets. And this is what KSAFA is aiming to do. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to walk just through this is going to seem fairly detailed. I'm just going to walk through a high-level overview of some of the elements in our methodology that we published in May and are currently in a pilot and testing period with. So we have the product transfer document here. This is really one of the core features that has a unique ID, the transaction information, the fuel attribute information, and the claims accounting. So you can, the unique ID is what helps create that interoperability, but also knowing that that is only assigned to a very specific quantity of SAF. So you would be able to see if that was being used in other places. The transaction information is needed to see where that SAF has changed hands, the fuel attribute information, so the customer knows what they're buying, and the claims accounting, so you know what that SAF has been used for. So if we go into the next slide, I'll go through this really quickly. So here's the unique ID. We've broken it down because I know we're running short on time. We've broken it down, and it allows somebody to quickly identify what the production method, what the emissions reduction is, and what exactly that SAF is that they're purchasing. And then the batch range can be broken up into smaller and smaller numbers for individual quantities that are sold. Next slide. There are two sub-identifiers. So this one provides the characteristics of the SAF with the feedstock and the CI reduction values. The next slide. And here's the eligibility. So this shows what the SAF was initially eligible for, and then what ultimately it was used for as it was claimed through the chain of custody. If you go to the next slide. So this is walking through a sample transaction, moving from fuel producer to a corporate customer. And here I've kind of mixed both business and aviation and commercial aviation transactions with that aviation service provider representing like an FBO. If go to the next slide, I'm just quickly going to show, the producer would start this PTD, and it starts the unique ID, and it starts the fuel attribute and claims accounting. The transaction information would be filled out as the next step. So if you go to that next slide, so we'll look at this middle set of transactions here. Go to the next slide. So that unique ID is continued to be divided, and there are any changes to its eligibility made. The applicable transaction information is filled in, the fuel attribute information remains the same, and the claims accounting is updated for any claims made by the fuel supplier as they are passing this on to the FBOs and operators. If you go to the next slide. And finally, we'll look at the operators, the FBOs to the operators, the scope 1 claims. Next slide. So again, that unique ID is divided up even more into individual sales. That transaction information is added to that section. The fuel attribute remains the same, and the claims accounting is updated for any claims that have been made. Usually this would not happen. An FBO is not making any claims on the fuel. And we'll go to the last slide. So here's the operators reallocating scope 3 emissions reductions. So if you go to that slide again, it's just updating. So you can see how this would work. This is a growing document, and at the end, it's kind of a proof of all of the transactions made, all of the claims made for each individual unique batch of fuel. And sorry, can we take one step back? I'm just going to make one comment, and then that will be the end. So at the bottom, we mentioned the stackability of claims, and that's really how this can derive value from those environmental attributes, is each person within the chain, entity within the chain of custody, being able to demonstrate those emissions reductions with the producers, either in the mandates and the incentives, the operators under CORSIA, and in scope 3 emissions reduction. So when eligible to do so within the already established compliance program, we think this is a critical step in deriving the value of those attributes. And then if you go, I guess, 2 slides forward, this is kind of where KSAFA is. We're doing ongoing engagement with others in the community and the regulatory entities. We are testing our current version that was released in May. We held a public workshop for it as well, and we will make a version 2.0 either the last quarter of this year or first quarter of next year is our goal for that. And if you go to the last slide, I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, but I hope I was able to keep it to time. So that is the work of KSAFA.
Thank you very much, Madison. Yes, yeah, you kept on time. Thank you for that, and thanks for going like a lot of information. And it was very nice to see like in practice how these documents will work, the flow of information, how it will work. Like I guess this is very interesting to see, to have a visual idea on how the book and claim systems and claims will work. So thank you very much for that. And again, like I invite everyone to check the presentation that will be posted later this week on the website for the details and for further questions to our speakers, of course. And of course, also like remind like that the chat box is open here for questions, like, and depending on the question, we may be able to answer them live on the chat box here. So feel free to send our questions through the chat box as well. So with that, we'll move to our next speaker, who is Laura Hutchinson, Manager, Climate Aligned Industries at SABA, the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance, who will talk about SABA work on book and claim. So Laura, so the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bruno, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I'll try to breeze through these slides. Just to introduce SABA and RMI, where I work. RMI is a global nonprofit organization focused on the energy transition. And aviation is, of course, one of our key focus areas, as a critical sector to meet our collective climate targets. I lead our work on sustainable aviation fuel demand, which is what we see as a critical lever to help unlock sustainable aviation fuel supply at scale. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing there today. Next slide, please. Great. We covered this largely, but to emphasize one point here, we see book and claim as a really useful tool in certain cases for voluntary indirect procurement, which can help unlock activity that wouldn't be happening as fast or at all otherwise. So I'll talk a little bit about how that works in the coming slides, but this is one of many chain of custody models, as other speakers covered, and we see its value in SAF as particularly facilitating voluntary procurement. Great, next slide, please. So how does this facilitate voluntary procurement, and what's the impact that we have a potential to see, right? Book and claim systems, which allow the decoupling of the physical fuel volumes or product and the virtual attributes that can be associated but unbundled from that. If those systems are well designed and appropriately value those things, allow for simultaneously buyers to confidently invest in those decarbonized products and services to meet their targets, and suppliers to create a secondary value stream to secure advanced offtake agreements, basically bankability for their products. As a consequence of that, buyers can confidently plan to meet their climate targets, and suppliers can create secure project financing and build more capacity. And together we can speed up deployment and decarbonization through voluntary interventions that go above and beyond what policy might directly enable and require. Next slide, please. So what's involved in this, right? In a sustainable aviation fuel context and in general, we really see a couple critical elements to this puzzle. The first being, in order to claim something as something that has sustainability attributes, those need to be verified. This is done for SAF through a sustainability certification scheme. ICAO has a great example of this with the CORSIA system, which uses this mass balance certification scheme, of course. That is a direct input to a book and claim system that includes a standard that defines how a book and claim process can and should work, and a registry that adopts those specifications and meets and adheres to those rules. And these things together enable climate disclosure, which typically buyers are looking for accounting and reporting standards and guidance to follow in their disclosure so they can ensure that whatever's happening upstream that they're procuring through these indirect means, they're reporting accurately. So this is all that's involved here, and we've got fingers in all of these pies, as do others in this room today. Next slide, please. So SABA is the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance, and it's a joint initiative of ourselves at RMI and our colleagues at EDF, and with significant support from Neoteric Energy and Climate, or Kim Carnahan. Some of you may know her from her previous work with ICAO. We are a consortium and fit-for-purpose buyers alliance comprised of customers of aviation services. So a bunch of the big companies that you see on this list here, as well as aviators or folks for whom aviation is their primary business. So that includes airlines and carriers as well as OEMs. So this is us, and we're growing every day and comprise a meaningful set of companies who demand sustainable aviation and want to push it forward. So that's our consortium. Next slide, please. So we are doing these things as SABA. We have a sustainability framework that helps buyers understand what they want to procure via these indirect means. So this is, again, directly leveraging the sustainability certification schemes, those mass balance schemes, but helping buyers understand how those schemes, for example, map to the Science-Based Targets Initiative's requirements in more granularity. So we've got a document that lays this out. Happy to share it for those who are interested. The next thing that we're working on and about to launch, which I'll talk about in more detail today, is the SAF certificate registry, which is a ledger that is standardized and allows for secure and transparent issuance, transfer, and retirement of those environmental attributes to facilitate climate disclosure. The next piece that we've worked on is accounting guidance in collaboration with the Clean Skies for Tomorrow Coalition, which provides guidance for primarily corporate customers, but also the whole aviation value chain as to how to think about accounting and reporting of SAF certificates. And the final and probably most important thing that we're doing is facilitating collective procurement. So we've organized 2 RFPs so far and intend to do many more, which are basically calls to the market as a function of our aviation customers' stated demand for several years. So calls for fuels and their associated environmental attributes that can fulfill our customers' demand. This allows us to send an aggregated large-scale long-term demand signal to the market, which is unprecedented, and we're seeing really good results here. We just released and are in the process of facilitating the kind of finalization of deals for our first multi-year procurement, which was a 5-year, quite large stated demand signal. I'm happy to share more information there as well. Okay, next slide, please. I talked about this in large detail, but I just wanted to highlight in this model that encompasses the mass balance certification system, bridging into the book and claim system, bridging into climate disclosure, we're collaborating with all sorts of groups on this process, and this is an inherently overlapping set of networks. So we look at RSV and ISCC as kind of critical standard holders that own and hold schemes that define those sustainability attributes, as well as currently RSV's book and claim manual, which I'm sure Max will talk about in detail later on. And the accounting and reporting guidance is something that we've worked on in collaboration with a ton of industry stakeholders as well as the industry. Next slide, please. Great, so I'll spend a bit of time talking about the SAF registry in more detail, and then I'll end on a quick note about the broader collaborations that we're working on right now and what we see as important in the market moving forward. So as I said before, the SAF registry is our, as SABA and partners, version of a registry that we think is meeting particularly the corporate customers of aviation services needs. And the ways in which we're different here are laid out on the next slide. So we're designing this system to enhance user trust by ensuring 5 critical things. 1 being consistency. We feel that it's really important for the system to implement standardized processes as defined by coalitions, so in this case, RSV, for issuing, transferring, and retiring SAF certificates. The second critical thing is sustainability. So we provide all of the information for customers to be aware of all of the sustainability information as evidenced by the certification programs. And the third piece is we mitigate double counting by ensuring that valid claims are only made once for each intervention, so for each ton of SAF, including managing double counting between voluntary and compliance use, which I'll go into a bit more detail on later. The fourth thing is transparency. We're really trying to provide as transparent of a ledger as possible and practical to give, one, the users of these systems kind of more confidence and assurance about what they're investing in, but also the general public to kind of gain confidence in this type of mechanism and ensure that it can continue to grow and see public acceptance. And the final thing here is this is an independent nonprofit owned registry, and it will be multilaterally governed to ensure that we don't operate with a conflict of interest and that we have the broader stakeholder group and aviation sector and stakeholders' best interests in mind, and that we continuously evolve and improve the system to meet needs. So that's how we work. Next slide, please. Great. So as I shared before, we really see the registry as the link between procurement, which happens before the fuel is even produced in many cases, and disclosure, which happens after the fuel is delivered and consumed. So outside of the registry is where contracts are signed, money changes hands, and the fuel is produced. And the registry is really just a ledger that tracks the attributes of the fuel after its production. And we really think that this is an important distinction between the functionalities of a registry and a broader marketplace and other kind of facilitating tools that may come into the market at some point that can and should interact. But registries are kind of a fit for purpose ledger that prioritizes the sustainability information above all else. And then outside of the registry, again, with a well-defined and well-governed system, folks can rely on this to kind of evidence their climate disclosure. Great. Next slide, please. Okay, so some basics that I'll cover. I'll try to cover this quickly, and of course, this information is available afterwards. There are two key unit types that the SAF registry holds. The first is we call the SAF-CA, which is designed to be held and retired by an air transport provider, so an airline or a carrier. This represents the classical Scope 1 emissions reduction. The second type of unit we call a SAF-CE, or for end users of aviation services. So this includes customers of aviation services, both on the passenger and the freight side of the spectrum, as well as logistics service providers like freight forwarders. There are three main types of things that SAF sees beyond the certified sustainability information that come along with the SESs and RSB and ISCC certification for any given fuel supply chain that are checked and differentiated. The first being a sustainability tier. So the registry at the point of issuance is able to label units into one of these three tiers. The first being SCS eligible. So this basically just checks that the fuel supply chain is certified to any RSB or ISCC standard across the value chain. The second correlates loosely with SBTI's sustainability criteria, which is helpful for our customers of aviation services that are looking to eventually use these types of claims to evidence their SBTI targets. And then the third is what we call the SABA preferred tier, which meets additionally stringent criteria, kind of basically more certifications targeting indirect land use change and displacement. The usability tier element of this helps differentiate whether a unit can be used for voluntary purposes or whether it's a compliance specific unit. So it's already been used towards an emissions reduction or will be. This covers both kind of fuel supplier obligations as well as carrier obligations. And then the final piece of the puzzle is what we call assurance level, which provides assurance that certificates represent certified information and that information still holds true in the physical supply chain over time. So a validated unit basically ensures that the underlying certification status is still valid. Revalidation ensures that after a year in the common cycle of certification, that certification still exists. And a verified status goes above and beyond that by kind of checking to the extent that there are any changes to any information that a certification body or an auditor comes in to verify those uniquely and discreetly. Next slide, please. Great, I'll walk through this really quickly because I know we're running out of time. Basically, the key point of this slide is we really think that registries can and should enable as much flexibility as to pathways for transfer and retirement as possible while maintaining checks that are appropriate about usability. So basically ensuring that customers of aviation services have as much agency as possible, but also can't accidentally retire something for voluntary use that ends up being used for a compliance purpose. So that's how we've designed the system to kind of prioritize flexibility, but also maintain those double counting safeguards. Next slide, please. We'll go live in Q4. It's been a long process, but we're really excited for folks to use the system and happy to share more information once we're live. Next slide. Okay, final one here. We highlighted mostly SABA's specific efforts today, but that's not the only thing we're doing. We really think it's critical for the broader ecosystem of folks playing in this space to be more coordinated, which is part of the reason why RMI alongside Smart Freight Center launched the book and claim community for heavy transport this year. This bridges across from aviation to maritime shipping, in which a lot of these conversations are happening as well as the trucking sector potentially. And we are doing work across the accounting and targets, certification, registries and related applications, and communications and capacity building buckets that Azim highlighted earlier. So encourage folks to follow along there. We're doing a lot of education, have a newsletter, but really we think that broadly what needs to happen in this space moving forward is clarify indirect procurement's ability to count in climate disclosure, to noting and acknowledging that a level of standardization will increase market confidence and clarity. So advocating and convening around that objective. To the extent that there are multiple registries, they need to be able to interoperate. So we're doing a lot of convening across kind of registry developers and other assets in this space to try to clarify those elements. And then finally, doing a lot of work to try to clarify what exists and where to point people in terms of resourcing to drive adoption, because this is really an important element to unlock for us to drive sustainable aviation fuel scale. So that's what we've got. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Laura. Like, nice to hear like that this coordination between your system and the approved sustainability certification schemes, RSB and ISCC, how these things are being worked out by you. Like, that's very nice. And it's a good link to our final speakers from the session, right? Because we'll hear now from the ICAO approved sustainability certification schemes that, as I said, they're now certifying fuels and economic operators under CORSIA. And they are also, of course, working on this book and claim aspect. So now we'll start with Max Eschenbaum, Digital Solutions Managers from RSB, from the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials. So Max, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Also a welcome from my side. Thank you, ICAO, for the invitation, and also thank you to the other presenters to providing already some context for book and claim. My name is Max Eichelbaum. I'm RSB's Digital Solutions Manager. I'm coordinating the digital developments on RSB side, but have been mainly focusing on developing a book and claim registry and the book and claim recognition procedure. I will be explaining a bit in detail later. Next slide, please. All right, book and claim, maybe a quick word about the book and claim goals we are trying to achieve at the RSB. So we know that aviation fuels are going to be around for the next minimal 2 decades, and we need to accelerate here the decarbonization of those hard to abate sectors like aviation. We are also all aware that there is a price premium, a significant price premium to conventional jet fuels, and book and claim provides a great opportunity here for creating demand and allowing customers willing to pay the premium to access SAF. Something I also like to highlight is that there is a growing demand for corporates for in-sector solutions. So we have the insets on one side, and then we have the offsets on the other side. So offsets are emission reductions that are not related to the company's operations, where insets directly take an impact on the emissions created by an organization, such as corporate travel. And what we clearly see here is that corporates distance themselves from offsetting programs because they spend money on emission reductions, but also realize that offsets come today with a very bad reputation, and that's the reason why those programs get retired, and that there is a strong focus now on insetting solutions, where book and claim provides a great solution to access those insets. And then, of course, we have the particular case here with SAF that the supply is very regional, but then the demand is very scattered around the world. So we need to try to link those two different situations, and book and claim is a great tool to get there. Next slide, please. So we had already some explanation about the concept of book and claim. Maybe some additional notes here. So on the left-hand side, we have a location, an airport that has access to physical SAF, On the right-hand side, we have airport number 2 that doesn't have access to sustainable aviation fuel. Through a book and claim registry and through the book and claim chain of custody model, we are able to transfer the sustainability attributes to another location. So the SAF supplier decouples the sustainability attributes from the product, from the SAF, and registers those to a registry. With that, the POS, the proof of sustainability that usually travels with the physical product, gets surrendered to the registry, so isn't available for any other claims anymore. That means the moment I decoupled the sustainability attributes from the physical product, the product becomes a conventional product and is sold as such. And then through the registry, I can transfer the claim virtually to any location globally, and then that customer on the claim side can buy those book and claim units, we call them, to make a claim on emission reductions. One book and claim unit represents 1 metric ton of NEET certified product. So very important to highlight this. Of course, for each BCUs, there are underlying values such as emission reductions based on the original product from where the sustainability attributes have been decoupled from. Next slide, please. So book and claim is known, so the book and claim chain of custody system system is known for a while. However, the implementation into the industry is a quite complex task, and the RSB for that developed the book and claim system. So the book and claim system is composed of integrative elements to scale sustainable fuels, and it has been mentioned before, the RSB book and claim manual is here the cornerstone. So it is a normative guidance we developed to help implementing a book and claim in the aviation sector, providing the boundaries and principles we should apply to have a robust and credible system in place and allow the virtual transfer of sustainability attributes. We realized then, while developing the manual, that there is a need for a registry that kind of lives the process explained in the book and claim manual to facilitate pilots to learn what are the particular needs a book and claim registry has, and what is it we need to adapt in the book and claim manual to also allow other stakeholders to adopt the principles outlined in the book and claim manual. So the registry has been a really helpful tool for us to get feedback to shape the RSB book and claim system, and I will go into that a bit later again. And the third component is the RSB book and claim recognition. So also throughout the work, we realized there are now multiple developments or multiple registry developments or independent developments ongoing, and we realized there is a need for harmonization. So the idea is to recognize other independent registry under the RSB recognition, verifying that the RSB manual requirements have been fulfilled, but that there are also minimum system requirements and IT security requirements are fulfilled, making sure that we all move into the same direction with book and claim. Because you can imagine, if there's one registry that tries to cut corners and an accident happens, the reputation of book and claim will be harmed, and that is something we really should avoid, especially right now, building more presence for this really a big opportunity, book and claim. Next slide, please. So the RSB book and claim system has been tested through pilots, and there's a continuous improvement, as I mentioned, and feedback to the RSB book and claim manual, and also to the RSB book and claim registry developments. In addition to that, we were able to develop the RSB book and claim recognition, working on ecosystem harmonization, and that means aligning partners, providing education, but then also registering, recognizing other registries, and then hopefully in the future, get to a point where we allow registry to be interoperable. And that is something very important to overcome double counting challenges we have with book and claim, and I will touch on that in a second. So the RSB value is that we're a multi-stakeholder organization and trying to engage our partners to build consensus. And we are supported by the industry, environmental organization, policymakers, but also other standard setters such as the SPTI or Smart Freight Center. We are an independent nonprofit organization. I think that's also something very important to highlight here. The claims are third-party certified, and really our focus is here on system harmonization. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we want to make sure that there is a feedback from the industry, from stakeholders that shall apply our guidance, and we are very grateful to have really strong partners along the way. So I always repeat this: we can develop a very robust system, but if this system can't be implemented, we are not creating any impact. So it's very important that we find the balance between building something robust, but also allow the industry to apply those requirements and standards to create a credible outcome, and following a long-term vision and not trying to cut corners to just gain some short-term benefits. So here a big thank you to all our partners. Next slide, please. Double counting has been mentioned before. There are actually three types of double counting, and I'd like to highlight how we try to mitigate the risk that comes with those different types of double counting. So the first type is double issuance. Double issuance happens when, for instance, a SAF supplier decouples the sustainability attributes from a physical product, such as SAF, and registers those claims on multiple registries. Yeah, so there is a claim for the same product on multiple systems, and that is something that needs to be avoided. And I can also highlight here that this is the most challenging of those three different types of double counting. How we want to overcome it. So there is a third-party audit requirement we have for the supplier that does the decoupling. So there's an independent verification involved for this. We have an RSB registry audit. And also, as mentioned before, we are working on the RSB book and claim recognition procedure to build an ecosystem of registries that follow similar principles. And with that, of course, we want to also verify if credits or BCUs have been issued multiple times to make sure that that doesn't happen. Then we have double use. So that is rather an in-system requirement. So that means that the system should make sure that a BCU, a book and claim unit, isn't sold multiple times to different organizations, different companies. This can be assured by having a registry audit and also having a public retirement statement, allowing the public and other auditors also to verify the retirement statements that has been created. So the claims on those book and claim units. I will go into the assurance process we have developed in a second. And then the last part is double claiming. So this happens when a BCU has been retired. So the claim has been made. And here, a PDF, for instance, so the retirement statement that is the output of the retirement process, the PDF could be changed, forged, and this is something that needs to be also checked. And for this purpose, we have implemented a QR code. We have implemented a link on the retirement statement. So whoever has this retirement statement as a claim and needs to provide verification or proof to an auditor that those claims are real, the auditor can check the public database and check if the information provided on the retirement statement is correct. And yeah, that's for the double claiming. And something I wanted to add here. No, all good. All right. Next slide, please. All right, there are certain key requirements that are required. So on the left-hand side, we have the mass balance environment. So that has been already discussed. So we require that there is that every operator is certified by the RSB or recognized by IRAD or any other team recognized by IRAD or ICAO CORSIA. So that is already in place, and it is not a perfect system today, but it provides sufficient assurance since every operator that is certified in the supply chain needs to have a certification and will be independently audited. Then at the blending point, we have the decoupling, and the organization that does the decoupling needs to hold a trader certification, an RSB trader certification. So that allows an independent auditor to go to that supplier and verifies the information that has been submitted to the registry is in line of the SAF. So making sure that the SAF, where the sustainability attributes have been decoupled from, has been sold as conventional fuel, and no claims can be further made on that SAF. So that is something that the supplier needs to fulfill. Any other operator in the transaction chain later doesn't need to have any specific certification. That is taken care of by the registry itself, that this process is watertight. Next slide, please. So here a quick overview of the RSB registry and how that all works together. So again, we have on the left lower side the booking side. So the fuel supplier, fuel producer, depending on the configuration, needs to provide information or needs to submit information to the RSB registry, and also with that surrender the POS that is usually transferred with a physical product to the registry, and with that a BCU is issued and in the supplier's account. The supplier then can transfer that BCU to a transport service provider such as an airline. The airline then can provide some additional information and with that become a claimant for that BCU. Then the transport service provider can further transfer this to an end client that can then make also a claim on the same BCU, but for Scope 3 emissions. So we had the explanation between the Scope 1 and Scope 3 emissions earlier, so I don't need to explain this here another time. And then when the end customer or the transport service provider decides to retire the BCU, a retirement statement is created, and with that in parallel an entry on the public retirement table, and this document is then distributed to the participants or to the companies listed on the retirement statement. So that is certainly a Scope 1 emitter and can be a Scope or can be multiple Scope 3 emitters. And that includes freight forwarders or end clients such as corporates. Clearly highlighted here as well that the commercial agreements happened outside the registry. So our registry is a pure chain of custody tracking tool and shall provide a secure environment for new participants in the book and claim space to evaluate their situation and business case, because there are many individual situations, and all that, of course, happens under the umbrella of the book and claim manual. Next slide, please. So some final words about the RSP assurance model we have created. So here in the orange box, you can see again the mass balance chain of custody environment. That is when every operator needs to be certified. Then we have the blending point where the decoupling of the sustainability attributes happened. So here the sustainability attributes are booked into the registry. So this part again is verified by an external auditor that is referring that is controlling the information that has been submitted to the registry and is part of the RSB trader certification, as explained earlier. Then we have the RSB registry audit itself, and the approach is here: if I can assure that the booking or the input into the system is correct, and if I can assure that the system is working correct, then I also have assurance that the output of the system is correct. And this is how we approach it. So we are not planning to verify all transactions on the registry. We assure just that the algorithms and all the functions within the registry working properly, and with that we assure that the output is correct. And then we have an independent audit on the claim side, and here a corporate can point to the public retirement table of the RSB registry, so an auditor can verify the information on the retirement statement and on the public retirement table. Next slide, please. Yes, next steps. So we plan to expand the system to the shipping sector and update the book and claim manual in the beginning of 25, including shipping. There will be a minor update middle next year where we provide some clarifications and improvements in the current book and claim manual. So it will be version 3.1. So that is planned for mid-summer, for the summer next year. Next point, please. The release of the RSB registry is foreseen for end of October. Next point, please. System recognition, stakeholder consultation ended 25th of October. So we are having a follow-up meeting and plan to get the RSB board approval for beginning of 24 and allow other independent registry to become RSB recognized. Next point, please. Next point, please. Data harmonization is a point. So it's not a requirement of the recognition right now, but will be an effort, a collective effort with all the other registries to work on that. And then interoperability, understanding how that could look like, because there are different approaches we could take, allowing interoperability and overcoming the challenges we have with double counting. And so that is also a very exciting task I'm looking forward to work on next year. I think that's all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. And here are our contact details, and I'm looking forward to your questions in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. All very exciting. Lots going on, like as usual. And we're happy to have you guys on board, on this topic as well. So now, last but not least, we'll hear from our other ICAO approved sustainability certification scheme. So we have Thomas Bock, System Manager and Lead Aviation in Maritime at the ISCC, International Sustainability and Carbon Certification. So Thomas, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Hi, everyone. This is Thomas from ISCC reporting in live from a very rainy Cologne in Germany today. I can be quick, see looking at the time, and that we have some time for questions left at the end. And I'm aware that I'm the last speaker. There's been quite a bit of input so far already. and I certainly don't need to repeat many of the excellent points that have been made by previous speakers. But I'll just take, if okay, a couple of minutes to highlight a few key aspects, and of course, more from the, let's say, certification scheme perspective, so with a view squarely centered on environmental integrity and credibility. Next slide, please. So I feel any book and claim system, and this has been mentioned throughout the presentations, of course, they really should follow key principles. And first, that's really that any type of SAF that enters such a system, is handled in a system, claimed in such a system, should follow a high standard in terms of sustainability. And we do have quite strict and internationally recognized sustainability criteria already, for instance, under CORSIA. So it does make sense to always require that any type of SAF entering and be claimed through any book and claim system follows those criteria and is certified accordingly. Then what we know is there's different regulatory programs and frameworks, but also the voluntary sector or the voluntary market and certain disclosure requirements. And many of the economic operators, but also airplane operators, they have obligations and or commitments in the different frameworks. And it's really crucial that we design a book and claim system or systems to be in alignment where we can and where appropriate with those frameworks. And many of the systems, or all of those, what I can see that have been presenting today, are considering this to a great degree already. Towards the bottom, what's certainly important is not only environmental integrity and credibility, but also practicality. So it's great to have a system that delivers credible claims and has integrity, but if it's not practical in terms of implementation and daily work, then it probably will suffer from low adoption or confusion. So what's really important is considering the certification ecosystem that's already there, with thousands and thousands of economic operators certified today with their existing mass balance certification system, and try and really build onto that and incorporate that into the existing certification systems, which is also what's done today and with the systems that we're talking about. And then, and this has been also mentioned throughout the presentations really, is we need to have safeguards in place to help mitigate the risk of double counting. So for any book and claim system to work, it needs to have credibility, it needs to be able to instill trust in any stakeholders, regulators, as well as broader society. And this is done through auditing verification framework, through understandable and clear and transparent rules, and transparency in terms of saying what kind of claims are made via book and claim systems, being very transparent and publishing this publicly. And then, of course, seeing that we'll likely have different systems existing alongside each other, including the registries, that those communicate and work with each other, as was also mentioned by Max earlier in his last slide. Next slide, please. Feel free to, yep. And one more, yep, and one more. So just to confirm that ISCC is indeed not inactive here in the space. So we do have our own system, which is called the ISCC Credit Transfer System, that's about to go into public consultation, so about to go live and be published. Which includes, and this is quite similar to many of the systems that have been discussed today, in the sense that we lay down system rules, so sort of guiding principles that must be true for any kind of transaction in the system. Clear requirements for organizations, meaning SAF suppliers, airlines, corporate customers that participate in the system. And of course, clear requirements in terms of what can be registered in terms of SAF, what can be transferred and retired, and an audited and verification system around that. And then as sort of a key feature or key thing to implement this in practice is the registry, so a standardized electronic database that traces and tracks all the transactions and claims that are made through this, and also provides public information about SAF claims that are made through that registry. And we have just recently completed the very first pilot transaction with Neste as the leading SAF producer and DHL, and there's a few more currently in the pipeline. Next slide, please. Feel free to go through the slide into the next slide. I think this was covered already. Next slide, please. Feel free to, yep, and one more, and one more. Thank you. So maybe just to round this off here and maybe lead a bit over into the Q&A later, I feel what's really important is that any book and claim system that it must work for all involved stakeholders. And this includes certainly SAF producers, SAF suppliers, so where they have their existing certification systems, that you can certainly try and make it as straightforward and plug and play as you can to be able to build on what's already there and integrate this into the existing auditing and verification framework that is already there. Then for airlines, they certainly need to be able to, via book and claim system, fulfill their reporting obligation and commitments, be that in regulatory frameworks such as CORSIA, but also in voluntary frameworks such as SBTI. Then we have the aviation end customers or corporate customers, and they will only be willing to offer additional funding if they can make credible claims in return. So they need clear documentation for the emissions reductions that they're buying, and peace of mind that that is a solid claim that they can make. And then for the certification bodies, for those auditors that actually audit on the ground, they also have the existing processes, and that needs to be considered as part of a broader auditing framework for book and claim. And what's not included here, but which should be included here, I would argue, is two more very important stakeholder groups. The first is regulators, authorities. So if book and claim is to be used under a regulatory program, then certainly what regulators have an interest in is how can this help me in achieving the goals of the policy first? And second, how can it help me in monitoring progress towards that policy or those policy goals? And then certainly last but not least, I would argue environmental groups and the broader environmentally aware public and society. Because at the end of the day, it is with them also that we need to build and maintain trust for all or for any type of book and claim system to work. And I hope that was very quick. Thank you very much, and happy and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Yeah, right on the point, and a good wrap up to everything that we heard today. And as I said in the beginning, so we will be making this presentation available very soon on our website, and including the contacts of our speakers. So feel free really to contact them, if you have any follow-up questions on any specific aspects of the systems. And we look forward to continuing to discuss these issues and see these systems evolve and come to fully be working in practice. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So and see you next time then.